Well, welcome to another wonderful day here in the United Kingdom. Is what we call the bank holiday. And across the world, there are other places that are basically working, of course.
If you work in a team, you've got to try.
And where we are as of today is to look at things that is happening in our neighborhood, in our area, and Nigeria being the most populous Black nation in the world with almost 200 million people. It's time again that we are getting ready for the 60th independence anniversary of the country from 1960 to 2020. And there's not any other person among those that we classify to have the history of Nigeria than the person that we're going to interact, discuss, and converse on this great nation, the #1 in terms of economy on the African continent, and without any doubt, the most populous Black nation in the world. I have with me Mr. Dele Ogun, who is a historian. Apart from that, he has a top legal background, and he has written books on Nigeria, on the Black culture, the Black people, and has a strong knowledge of what Nigeria should be and what he thinks and other people contributing to this conversation. Mr. Dele Ogun, you're welcome to the program and this conversation.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned, Nigeria is basically getting ready for her independence, 60th, the 6th decade of a country that was ruled by the colonial in 1960, or maybe even before 1960. Well, we have the 1940 amalgamation, but before then, Nigeria has always been there, either from bringing the North and the Southern people together, or in any how you may describe it. How will you fare or rate Nigeria as of today, from 1960 to today?
A confused place, and a very disappointing experience for all of us, all of our people. Hardly any can be, or I should say very few can be satisfied in terms of where we are. We speak a lot about our potential, but I always say potential is nothing without performance. And I don't think anybody can, hand on heart, say that we Nigerians have performed. So it's a position of disappointment and embarrassment, and indeed shame. I'll go as far as saying shame, because you see, if we were performing at the level we're supposed to be performing at, the events that you see in America with the George Floyds and the Black people, Africans, being disrespected in the way that they are, all this Black Lives Matter stuff, it's part of it stems from our underperformance in our home grounds. If your house is in order, your neighbors will respect you. If your house is in disorder, your neighbors will not want you around. This is part of the consequences that our people are suffering from this record of misgovernance.
Mm-hmm. So you basically feel that the Nigerian people are not satisfied with the performance of those who are leading the country. But again, when you have to say that, you have to agree that in the 1960s, the people who are there presently were not the one that were there. And the Nigerians tend to blame the founding fathers or the people that caused the first coup, presumably in the 1960s or early 1970s when it ended. Will you continue to blame those people back then, or do you think Nigeria as a nation should have moved forward?
The reality is that those people were hardly to blame. The reality is that from the very inception, when the British constructed Nigeria, and we always have to bear in mind that Nigeria was not made by Nigerians. I know many of our intellectuals will try and con us and deceive us into believing that we made Nigeria. We did not make Nigeria. It's folly to suggest that we made it. So therefore, the architects who built the house designed it, and I wrote about this very recently, they designed it to fail. They designed it to work precisely as it is working now, dysfunctional to the point that even now in 2020, we're not able to speak of regular light, let alone 24-hour light. The problem is not technology. The problem is not human knowledge. The problem is not a deficiency of resources. The problem is political will. And that political will stems from the defective political structure that we were lumped with through the amalgamation of 371 different ethnic groups. And then we are led to believe that such a mad concoction can be described as a nation. It simply cannot. It's a concoction made by the worst minds imaginable to produce the very result that we're laboring under now. We're not where we should be.
Now, of course, if I use the word concoction, which means it has been identified to be a mixture of things being put together by somebody.
Correct.
Now, for those who identify that this was a concoction being put together by people who wanted Nigeria to be in her position as of 2020, but this is now 60 years since that handover has been given to the people. How come it's taken them 60 years, yet they're not able to identify what they need to do as a nation?
I think the answer to that is straightforward. The answer is that the architect hid the designs, buried the defects, covered it up, such that it has taken us 60 years to understand that the problem is not actually the people of Nigeria, that the problem is the design and the structure of Nigeria. If the architect had fessed up at the beginning to say that, look, this cannot work, we would have sorted it out much earlier. Instead, we were led to believe that, oh, you've got a perfectly workable arrangement there. All it needs is good people. We've been looking for that Messiah for 60 years. It's time to give up on looking for the Superman that's going to make Nigeria work. It's time to redesign that structure, take ownership of it. We can't own what is not ours. This structure is not ours, and we are asked to take responsibility. We will take responsibility for what we are responsible for, but we will not take responsibility for what others are responsible for. And I say categorically, without fear of serious contradiction, that this structure was not made by us. The responsibility and the challenge now, in the light of the record of the last 60 years, is to redesign it in our own interest, in our own image.
How come then, for example, if it is in our own image, people are still talking about the 1979 constitution or the military constitution, saying, for example, it's not made by the Nigerians. So are we now living on the handover note, or are we living on the 1979 constitution, or are we living on the 1999 so-called amending constitution in the country? Because presumably the Nigerians many have identified a problem, but now is the implementation, as you said, maybe the political will to execute it that is lacking.
The reality is that we're operating, and we have been operating, without any constitution. That is the reality. Constitutions are made by the people who it is supposed to govern. It is the people that make the constitution to regulate the powers of the government. It is not government that makes constitutions for the people. So everybody knows that in the preamble to the current constitution, it reads, "We the people." Nonsense. Everybody knows it was never the people. So it's time to stop deceiving ourselves. It is time, now that this system has collapsed, it has broken. It cannot be repaired. It must be replaced. And it must be replaced with a constitution that is made by the ethnic groups who were neighbors in this geographical space before the European intrusion. We lived alongside each other before the intrusion. It must be made by those people. Each and every one of them must see themselves in that new constitutional arrangement. If you do that, that guarantees peace, because it is not armies, it is not police force that secure peace for a people. It is a settlement. When you get that constitutional settlement, there will be peace. When you get peace, there will be progress. When you get progress, there will be development. And then there will be satisfaction and joy amongst the people. Right now, we have a false narrative and a false existence. It is not ours. We must reject it.
Well, for the people to reject it, you mentioned another word. You said without constitution. Is the United Kingdom working with a constitution?
It has got a constitution fashioned by its people through a process of to some extent, conflict, but it was ultimately shaped. What people mistake is this. They say the British Constitution is not written. Well, it is written. It's just not written in a single document like the American one, but they are documents which together make up the Constitution of the United Kingdom.
Very well. In that case, now let's look at without a constitution, and then you mention we the people. Are the military in Nigeria or in any part of Africa, are they not the people? Are we saying the military people are not citizens of that country?
They're not the people. And I have to question, in actual fact, whether they are on our side, our military. The only wars I've ever known them to fight is, seriously, is against their own people. It's time that the army behave like the soldiers in other countries and be on the side of their people. Oliver Cromwell was on the side of his people. We talk about the British Constitution. Oliver Cromwell was a military leader who overthrew the then monarchical rule and introduced constitutional government in Britain. They were on the side of the people. Our own ones, they've made the people their enemies, and they're enemies of the people. They need to be on side with the people. This is their problem. This is their children's problem, and they need to open their eyes to that reality.
Looking at it, as, of course, before hopefully they open their eyes to the reality of the situation, the Nigerian people elected reps, senators, to the House of Assembly in the National Center. How come these people that were elected by the people have not yet identified that there is a default in the Constitution and they need to change the Constitution, amend it to the benefit of the Nigerian people? Remember, there was a 2014 conference as well, the National Conference. How come that we're still blaming somebody or some people while we, the Nigerian people, presumably have those elected members? Why are they not doing the needful immediate?
Well, there are 2 points. One, question mark over this, we elected them. If you have a defective electoral system, such as we have, such that so many elections now are determined by members of the judiciary, not the people. In a proper election that is run properly, the people vote and the people's votes are counted in good faith and sincerely. And then you get their representatives. We have a situation where every election ends up in court and litigation, and then a panel of judges will make a decision as to who's the duly elected person. In those circumstances, where that becomes a habit, you don't really have an electoral democracy. You have a selective democracy, democracy by selection. The second point to second answer to your point is this: that the government, the establishment, have conspired to separate those who should be the representatives of the people in the National Assembly, to distance them from the interests of the people who they're supposed to represent. What do I mean by that? If you look at levels of remuneration that's been paid to these members, these National Assembly members, it's actually a bribe. They've been so overpaid relative to the work that they do that their interest then becomes divorced from the people they're supposed to represent. If they were part-time representatives, let them get a proper job and then represent the people in their spare time. Then you get the true representatives of the people, not the professional politicians. You will get the genuine politicians, the ones who will really represent their people's interests. Right now, what people are chasing by way of election is simply the opportunity to share in the carving up of the resources of the country. And that's why their remuneration levels are ridiculously above the levels that you'll find anywhere else. For what return? What bills, what legislation have we seen that's actually made a difference to the lives of the Nigerian people? None at all.
Selection or democracy, or selected democracy as you may identify, based on these people in the National Assembly. Will you probably agree in the direction that if INEC, which is the body regulated or the official body that need to monitor everything to do with election in Nigeria, if indeed they are handling all the process of the code of conduct of election, that the Nigerian people will probably have a better leaders in office?
Well, it's a great responsibility on INEC, which perhaps it's beyond them, because INEC itself is a creature of the defective and fraudulent structure that we have. A bad tree can't produce good fruit. INEC is an aspect of that. So if we're looking to INEC for the solution, we won't find it. The solution lies in a new constitutional settlement, which is genuinely the handiwork of the peoples, which will reflect the experience that they've had over the last 60 plus years. And the new constitution will then be shaped to make sure that they never return to these crossroads again.
What about the 2014 National Conference? Do you think people need to refer to the output or the outcome of that National Conference, or do you think they need to have a new referendum in Nigeria? Bearing in mind now, there are more people or more ethnic groups shouting, calling for what they tag as restructuring. Should restructuring be the way, or what do you understand to be restructuring in the process of the Nigerian nation?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what restructuring actually means. People it's easy to mouth restructuring, but when you probe them as to what do you actually understand by restructuring, you'll find that the answers are often confused. When the restructuring concept originated, and it's originated during the Nadeco period, before the so-called 1999 constitution came through, it was a call for a genuine constitutional conference. And a genuine constitutional conference is a conference of the ethnic groups that make up Nigeria. The 2014 confab was not such a conference, because the government never wanted it. But a national conference shouldn't be the choice of the government. It is the right of the people. It is the opportunity for the ethnic groups, all of them, to come, their representatives. Each will send their representatives to the center. Those representatives will knock heads together, and out of the process will emerge a new constitutional settlement, similar to what happened in South Africa, where each of the ethnic groups sat around a table and then fashioned a rainbow constitution. Since when South Africa has been dynamic in its performance, it has pushed back the internal political problems that were holding up its progress and development. That's where we want to be. And there's no alternative to a proper constitutional conference, which, as I say again, for emphasis, it is a conference of the ethnic groups that make up Nigeria, each and every one of them.
Do you see that possibly happening in the context of Nigeria, of what you know as of today? Can that happen?
Yes, it can. Whether the political class wants it or not, we are heading in that direction. You either move purposefully in a particular direction with a design and an outcome in mind, or events simply force that situation. We either allow the existing arrangements to collapse around us, or we manage the changeover. And it must be in the interests of everyone that we have a managed process rather than a situation of collapse, which I fear is where we're heading to as things stand.
On this aspect, let me ask this, which has been discussed widely. Do you think the Nigerian context or the Nigerian people need to continue blaming the military's constitution of 1979 or thereabout?
The problem, as I've said, lies deeper. All of those constitutions were not constitutions. They're constitutions in name. You can call something a constitution, but it doesn't mean it is a constitution. people got to get a proper understanding of what a constitution is. The constitution is made by the people, not by the serving government. So, for example, this government now has pushed out a call for people to come forward with amendments to the constitution. That's not the way it's supposed to work. It's not for the incumbent government to amend the documents, the fundamental document that constrains and governs and regulates its own conduct. That's self-regulation. It is the people that regulate the government. It is the people that empower the government. And so whether it's 79, whether it's 99, they're all birds of a feather. These are fraudulent instruments, simply impositions on the people. They give a facade of legitimacy, but the reality is that these are not the handiwork of the people. And if we need a constitution, and that constitution is one that will be made by the ethnic groups that were neighbors in the Nigerian space, the code by which we will agree to live side by side.
This is almost 300 plus ethnic group in the country. Now, apart from South Africa, because the context sometimes you might like to use other example that other African countries have adopted the People's Constitution. Apart from South Africa, which other countries can we classify that they have adopted this constitution? Because if it is rampant all across Africa, then Nigeria in that case will not be an exception, not to follow the majority of the countries on the African continent.
We as Nigerians, as you opened, we are supposed to be the, I think you described it as the biggest black nation on the continent or on the earth. Yes, we're not supposed to be followers, we're supposed to be leaders. Unfortunately, we've allowed the South Africans to take the lead. And are we going to sit back and wait for other countries in Africa to follow in that direction? Different countries will get there at different points, dependent upon their internal circumstances. South Africa got there early because of the bloody nature of the conflict that was taking hold of the country between the indigenous African people and the settler community. Nigeria is heading in that same direction in my assessment. And so it is events that dictate at what point people come to their senses and say enough is enough. We need a proper civilized arrangement to regulate our affairs. Winner takes all cannot be the way forward. Anybody who thinks that that is a sensible and workable way forward for Nigeria and for Nigerians is mistaken. There cannot be a winner takes all situation.
Well, we have seen it from the 1970 winners didn't take all, and everybody come back and unite for the benefit of the bigger picture of the country. As of today, surely enough, there has been quite a lot of ethnic, especially the leading ethnic groups, be it the Yoruba, be it the Igbo, be it the Hausas, be it the Middle Belt, all talking about restructuring. And then of course, things are happening within the context of the Nigerian process, whereby now we have a national organization. Nevertheless, we identify that it's not compulsory for, especially your legal person, for them to be in the Nigerian Bar Association. Is a voluntary, is a CAC registered company. And now they are breaking into two, or at least from this bigger picture, they're breaking into two. Now, we're talking about Nigeria. We're talking about her 60th independence. How then do you see now if we begin to break into smaller units from a bigger unit? Would that be beneficial for the Nigerian context, or would that drive people toward that so-called restructuring of saying, well, everybody now is breaking into their regional angle? And it seems like indeed, without any doubt, that Nigeria is heading to that direction of restructuring, helped by others that maybe shouldn't be seen doing that.
Well, the events surrounding the Nigerian Bar Association and the establishment of what they've called the new Nigerian Bar Association, which actually means the Northern Nigerian Bar Association. the events surrounding that actually go to the heart of what I've been saying throughout this interview. The background, of course, is the ongoing slaughter in southern Kaduna. How can we describe ourselves as a nation, as one people, when we can slaughter each other so casually and so persistently under supposed governance structures and a constitution? The way forward is downscaling. Nigeria, as with 371 ethnic groups, is much too large, much too complex for one person to say that they want to run effectively. If we haven't been convinced of that before, we should clearly be convinced of that now after the performance of this Buhari administration. It is beyond the capacity of one Superman to manage effectively. Where something is too big, you've got to scale it down to the human level, where it can be managed more effectively. Downsizing is never a bad thing if the current size simply does not work. It takes maturity, it takes humility, it takes common sense, and a commitment to the people of your countries to be able to say, this is not working. We cannot carry on this way. We have to have a new arrangement. And that new arrangement is one where you will have a Northern Nigerian Bar Association. What's wrong with that? Why should we be upset about it? There's enough room in that geographical space for many bar associations, and then let them converge at the middle. Maybe the lawyers have, by accident, led the way. If that is the case, I applaud it. This is what I mean about managing change as opposed to allowing change to manage you. If we had embraced diversity, if we had embraced devolution, we would not be getting excited over a unilateral declaration of independence by the Northern Nigerian Bar. It shouldn't have happened that way. That's not the way it should happen. There was an opportunity, there have been opportunities for people to sit down and say, let's have a settlement, a constitutional settlement that works for everyone. It's where you seek winner takes all, but you then get these unilateral actions. And then what you end up with is a jumble. Better to manage the process. So if we don't want repeats of the kind of thing with, or the kind of thing that we've seen with the Northern Nigerian Bar Association, its declaration, it is time to sit around the table and fashion that settlement that I've spoken about.
Serious conversation. Somebody, Manu Onufadi asks, do you see this constitutional amendment or referendum taking place before the 2023 election in the country? How would you respond to that?
We should, this constitutional amendment, as I've said, you should ignore that. That is just plain, that is just twiddling thumbs again, whilst Rome is burning. What is needed is not something that can be put in place on an electoral timescale. We want to get it right. We don't want to come back to these crossroads again. Any amendments that they're pushing through now is simply tinkering. The constitutional settlement that I've spoken of has a longer timescale, but it will need some kind of interim government in the meantime.
Oh, interim government to facilitate that amendment?
Absolutely. I don't think you can have somebody like Buhari presiding over that process of the new constitutional arrangement. It's clearly mismanaged the current arrangement. You need some degree of impartiality, a true national interest in order for a true constitutional settlement to emerge.
Everyone we may ask, because now to have an interim government means the Nigerian people, or at the end of the election, or at the end of the present government, whichever government may be, to put in place a transitional government that will maybe spend 3, 6 months, 1 year to execute this so-called direction of constitutional amendment. Would that be possible in the Nigerian context?
There's no alternative. It's either that you allow this structure to fall apart, as it's progressively doing with the events in southern Kaduna and the threats in various other places across the country. You look around, you look at the Borno area, Boko Haram, you look at southern Kaduna, the Middle Belt area, you look at the southeast, the revival of the Biafra cause, you look at the southwest, there's fire all over. Obviously, it's burning with greater intensity in different parts of the country, but this is not stuff for a fresh lick of paint for the Constitution. It's not a makeup exercise. It's proper restructuring, a restart.
You mentioned the South and the Middle Belt and all the agitation. And of course, over the last few weeks in the Nigerian context, Dr. Obadiah Mielafia, who is one of the advocates of the Middle Belt, has been arrested or called in for questioning and of course released. Do you think there's anything wrong by inviting people to come and answer questions rather than just allowing them to be?
To say what a euphemism to say you're inviting them to ask to answer questions. It's a serious euphemism. Dr. Obadiah Mielafia, a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, a graduate, I believe, of the university, PhD of the University of Oxford, who is not known to be a radical voice prior to now. People can be sure that he had exhausted all avenues to have a discussion with those in authority who had responsibility for the peace, order, and good governance of southern Kaduna before he went to the measure that he then took of a national interview. And it's only after now he discloses to the rest of the country and the rest of the world what he had been discussing privately, that then they decided they want to invite him for interview. It's the people they ought to be addressing, those security operatives, are the ones who are doing the killings and those who are allowing the killings, not the ones who are ringing the alarm bells about the killings. It goes to show that we're indeed not one people. If we're one nation, we will feel the pain of the people of southern Kaduna. Clearly, the governor of Kaduna himself is not feeling the pain. What kind of nation is that?
Well, talking about the southern Kaduna, and of course the governor of Kaduna, as you mentioned, is somebody who has been classified well exposed because he is well traveled, and he has studied likewise in some of the top universities or associated universities around the world. In terms of leadership, of course, that's one thing that the Nigerian people are crying about and the international community are monitoring. Now, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair, mentioned just recently, as a few days ago, about what he thinks Nigeria lack in terms of becoming that leadership position that the country should be. Do you agree with what he said? He mentioned 3 things and all the things, but do you agree that Nigeria is really lagging behind in terms of an advanced nation?
I laugh whenever I hear Tony Blair's name. He's the model of what a politician should not be. In an ideal world, a politician should be principled, should be honest, should have integrity. I'm afraid Tony Blair fails on all 3 scores. I say that with all seriousness. Leave the Iraq war aside. Look at Tony Blair, who was in office, when was he Prime Minister? 1997, so around that period or so. What did he do in Britain? Britain is made up of just 4 ethnic groups: the English, the Scottish, the Welsh, and the Northern Irish. They had problems nowhere near the levels that we have, as everybody knows. And yet, what did they do? They introduced devolution to create a Scottish Parliament. He did it. Scottish Parliament, a Welsh Assembly, a Northern Ireland Assembly, recognizing the diversity of their peoples and giving each of their ethnic groups a sense of belonging in order to avoid the breakup of the country, because the Scottish nationalists were pushing for separation from Britain and the United Kingdom. Instead of all the nonsense advice that he's been given to us, to Nigerians and to Africans, why did he not extend that advice to Nigeria, those who were in office at the time? Why did he not recommend that? Look at the timescale. His devolution was 1997, his devolution bill. Our nonsense so-called constitution, 1999, which moved the other direction, made us a unitary state with more concentration of power in the center, despite the greater number of ethnic groups. So you could see they were prescribing one thing for the goose and another thing for the gander. This is why I smile and laugh whenever I hear Tony Blair advising anybody on anything. When they say a long spoon, you need a very long one, as far as Tony Blair says.
Right. You alluded, or you presented a few things that politicians should be honest and this and that, and he shouldn't be. How many of our Africans, Nigeria, for example, are what politicians should be? Because that means majority, because if they're honest and transparent and have those qualities that you outlined, Nigeria probably would not be in the position where she is as of today. And then we mentioned about the role of Tony Blair breaking or agreeing to the regional assemblies across the 4 nations. But is it the role of a foreign government to allow the Nigerian president or the Nigerian prime minister or the Nigerian ministers or the Nigerian National Assembly to come together and say, well, likewise, we can agree to our own devolution? What is the delay? 60 years still? British did their own, Nigeria should do their own too.
Well, maybe the answer is this. Let everybody think back to where Buhari first went immediately after his election. It was Downing Street. Usher said, well, what was he doing there? That's where he was reporting to, Downing Street, immediately after his election. Now, they have not gone. The structure was made by them. The structure has been supported and propped up by them, and is propped up with the advice of, what do you think the international development, what do they call themselves? International Development Secretary. What do you think they're doing? It's advice. So all we're saying is either leave us alone or give us the correct advice. But the advice that, but I do accept that ultimately it is for our people to filter the advice that we have been given. Our problem is this, that because of their interference with our electoral process, there was an interview of Goodluck Jonathan just the other day where he was saying, explaining how Barack Obama interfered with our electoral process to deliver the situation which we're in now. So they're full of advice, but the wrong kind of advice. They're not advising in our interests, they're advising in their own interests in order to keep us where we are.
But that's the point, that if it is for them to keep us where they want Nigeria to be. Nigeria is 60 years old. By now, even a grown-up adult should know what is right for the country. And that's what we're saying, that the elders, the leaders, by now, 60 years after, should be able to know what is good for the Nigerian people. Just like some of the guys mentioned here online, there's nothing technically wrong with the Nigerian Constitution, even with all the amendments, subject to even Nigerian people actually following the rule of law that is even mentioned in the Constitution. How many laws have been broken on a daily basis in Nigeria? Yet that Constitution is still there to have corrected quite a lot of things. You have the legal background. Why, 60 years after that, no elder can break something down? Mr. Ogun.
Yes. Well, here's the answer. People go on about 60 years. As I've said earlier, if a secret has been buried for 60 years, it was just the other day, as you well know, Alistair, that we pushed out the interview of Harold Smith, where he unveiled what had been covered up in terms of the rigging of the independence elections. And ever since, you see, once victory has been achieved by foul means, it is retained and secured by foul means. There's no inclination to play fair once you've achieved victory in the first instance by cheating and by rigging. And so those who say, oh, well, the problem is not that 60 years we should have discovered it. It was a buried secret. Had it been the case that the British government had come out and said, by the way, chaps, we rigged those independence elections. And they had told us that, let's say, before the Biafra War, do you think we would not have taken the steps necessary? Our clock has only just begun. It is only now, thanks to the revelation of Harold Smith, thanks to, I should say, the opportunity that I had to write the history of Nigeria in my book, A Fatherless People, that Nigerians are beginning to understand what really happened. So all those saying you had 60 years to sort it out, they're simply covering up for the Brits, the architects of our misfortune, and they should be ashamed of themselves if they're Nigerians. They should stop saying that. The secret was buried. We've had to uncover it. We've now uncovered it, and now the clock starts to tick. As for those who say our problem is not the Constitution, there are enough laws there at present. The problem is never, as a lawyer, I know that if you rely on laws for basic human decent conduct, then you've gone the wrong way and your systems are messed up from the outset. Basic conduct depends on just a sense of belonging and citizenship, not on laws. It is where you have a constitutional arrangement that is fraudulent and dishonest, that is not really reflecting the voice of the people and the aspirations of the people. That's when you then have to keep going back and amending and amending and amending. How many times has the American Constitution been amended since 1776? It is because when they put it together, it was put together by the representatives of the people. And they produced a document that actually served their interests rather than the interests of anybody else. Give us that, and then you get a new Nigerian.
Thank you very much. As we begin to come to the conclusion of this interactive session, there has been a document now that just popped up, the report of the 1917 or 1914 to 1917 amalgamation of Nigeria, bringing the North and the Southern Protectorate together. Now, this report highlighted quite a lot of new things, which I hope, time permitting you can sit with us to examine it with other Nigerian legal personalities. Now, this report just came out. And as I said, it highlighted quite a lot of things. For example, the population between the North and the South, the financial autonomy of each region. And at the end of the day, Lord Lugard mentioned that it was not because of the so-called economy and it's non-political. It's just to bring the North in parity with the South and to make the South and the North more or less equal between the two places that now make up the nation of Nigeria. And so far in the document, we didn't come across the so-called Nigerians, because there's a question going around as well, saying who signed the amalgamation document, who signed it? There was nothing there to talk about amalgamation. It was done by one person who was in charge of this country of just about 17 million people in 1914, Lord Lugard. What will you say with this report? Or the outcome or the future discussion of this wonderful nation called Nigeria?
Well, it's not a nation, it's a country. That's the first point. If it was a nation, the governor of Southern Kaduna would not be sitting there and seeing his nationals being slaughtered. It's not a nation.
I'm not holding you, I'm just slowing you down a tiny bit. Mr. Hun, what's the difference between a nation and a country?
A nation, you have the hallmarks of a nation. You have typically a common language, shared heroes, shared history, and a shared geographical space, often a shared faith. When you have several of those elements missing, then what you have is a state or a country, rather than what you can truly call a nation. So the Yoruba are a nation, the Igbos are a nation, the Ijaw are a nation, the Hausa are a nation, the Kanuri are nations, but Nigeria is a state or country. Now moving on in terms of the amalgamation, yes, there's been a lot of disinformation out there about this amalgamation. I've seen things going around saying, oh, only 5 Nigerians signed the amalgamation treaty. Total nonsense. No Nigerians signed anything called an amalgamation treaty. There was no amalgamation treaty. It was a colonial decree. I think people can understand it better if I use the word colonial decree, that was signed in Windsor Castle. And I don't know that Windsor Castle has ever been situated in Nigeria. It is, as far as I'm aware, is situated in England. So no Nigerian signed the document which gave rise to the amalgamation of Nigeria. If 5 Nigerians gather in this Zonguru, they say that 5 Nigerians gathered together to sign it. Let's see the document they signed, because I assure you it was not a document that gave effect to the amalgamation. The amalgamation was a purely British act, which was done in their interests. I pointed out to somebody the other day that if you contrast Sudan, Sudan also has South Sudan and Northern Sudan with the same Christian-Muslim divergence. They were left as 2 separate countries right up until 1956. Nigeria, on the other hand, was amalgamated from 2 separate countries. Northern Nigeria and Southern Nigeria was amalgamated in 1914. So the reason for the amalgamation in Nigeria in 1914, in my submission, was simply to take a stronger hold on the resources that had been established in Southern Nigeria. And those resources, as I've said in my book, included the oil that had been discovered as far back as 1908, not 1956. So Nigeria's story is full of all sorts of fabrications. And yes, it has taken us 60 years post-independence to start getting to grips with these misinformation and start educating our people, providing them with the knowledge and the information that they need in order to fashion a new way forward. Thank you very much. One of my last comment or question that came in was, there's something called the 100 years of Nigeria, which means from 1914 to 2014, now the 100 years has expired. What next? Is there something, is there any document in relation to this? Again, all part of the myth and myths of Nigeria. No such document given a 100-year lease or license or life to an amalgamation. The amalgamation was intended to be perpetual, and that's why in the Constitution, in inverted commas, they talk about an indissoluble state. Even that is a lie, because of course they did carve off part of Nigeria when they hived off southern Cameroon, did they not? What of Bakassi? Was that not part of the division of Nigeria? So we're surrounded by so many falsehoods, and the way forward is for our people to make the effort to educate themselves, because you can't wait for the government to educate you on these issues. This is where taking responsibility has meaning. You must take responsibility to teach yourself and to teach your children all the things that you need to know in order to make a better life for yourself and for them.
Well, thank you very much. I will now probably ask you your final parting words. As of today, Nigeria 68th independence is coming on the 1st of October, precisely just about 30 days from today.
Well, 60 years thrown away. I myself am 58 now, 60 years thrown away. But we can turn it to advantage if we take the lessons on board, if we stop pretending, if we stop deceiving ourselves, if we have a little bit more honesty and charity towards each other, we can still make a place, Nigeria in inverted commas, we can still make a place that works for us and for our children and our children's children, rather than the one that we've had, which has only served the interests of everybody else but us. It's our choice. And those who are interested, please visit our group, the Fatherland Group. Our logo is that we are armed with nothing else but a new understanding of our past, our present, and our future. That is all we need in order to make Nigeria that Nigerians truly want.
Well, thank you very much. I've been speaking to Mr. Dele Ogun, who's a leading legal person here in the United Kingdom, a leader within the Fatherland Group, and a publisher, an author, something, and somebody who has really researched deeply on the Nigerian historical perspective and the way we are and where we are as of today. And of course, shared with us as well what we need to do as a nation, as citizens, to settle, sustain the peace that the whole country so desires. One of our leading African leader, Nelson Mandela, says if Nigeria is at peace, then he believed the African continent would be at peace. If Nigeria is progressing, deeply so, the African continent as well will progress. So ladies and gentlemen, let's examine, let's talk, let's discuss more on Nigeria and how we can contribute to our development. Once again, Mr. Dele Ogun, thank you very much for being with us. And as we say, we will be back next week or next time together and to discuss more on the Nigerian issue. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you, Alistair, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.